Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We're here in studio today to talk about Drug Take-Back Day. To do that, we've got Sheriff Wagner, Chief Deputy Houchin. Thanks for being here, guys.
Good morning.
Morning. Beautiful Friday.
It is a little cooler.
It is.
Getting used to the fall weather again, but it's Nebraska, so here we go. Since we are in Nebraska, we have our friends from the Nebraska State Patrol with us today. And in studio, Chris Apley, John Lukesh, and Tyler Kroenke. And we're going to talk to you guys all about things prescription drugs, including the Drug Take-Back Day. But before we get to that, I want to learn a little bit about you guys. So who wants to start?
Oh, I think you should probably start with the boss, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if I really qualify as a boss here, but hey, I'm Chris Apley with the State Patrol. Been here since 2001, worked Traffic Services Division. Had an opportunity to go to the Investigative Services Division, work alcohol, tobacco. Fortunately for me, I've been a long history with your department. I had a chance to come here and work for the Fugitive Task Force underneath the Chief Deputy here back in the day, so that was a great opportunity, and I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys with that.
Yeah, some of the gray hair I have is because of you, Chris.
I guarantee I caused some of that, yes. Between you and some of the stuff that the sheriff had to deal with that we did back in the day, I guess I formally apologize today.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, you were always great to have around here, Chris, so it's good to have you back.
Well, it is great to work with your guys' department. I mean, I've told other people, one of the best departments in the state, if not the best sheriff's department in the state, and I can't be too impartial about that, but you guys do a fabulous job.
Yeah. Well, hey, we really appreciate it. So thanks for coming in.
Yeah. So moved on to the DA after that for a little while.
Okay.
And then I got promoted to criminal sergeant. Now we run one of those duties is work on the Pharmaceutical Diversion program and the script fraud. So I got Tyler over here. Tyler's one of our past guys as well. He's working with the DA group now. So
cool.
He can kind of talk about himself.
Tyler, where are you from?
Originally, I'm from North Bend, just up in Dodge County. Grew up there and then came on the patrol in 2010. Just like these two guys, I cut my teeth in traffic here in Lincoln. I was in David City and Wahoo, but always ventured down here and worked the streets down here. 2017, I moved over to the DEA task force doing pharmaceutical diversion, what we're going to talk about today. And then was it 2021, October, somewhere in there? Yeah. DEA started, I think it's 22. We're a year now. Yep. Okay. DEA started an overdose group where we respond to overdose deaths that are drug related and try to prove, who gave that lethal dose to them, and been doing that for the last year. So,
and I'm John Lukesh. I am also with the State Patrol. I started in 2006 working the road here in Lincoln. That was my duty station right out of the chute, and that's where I stayed, buried on nights and weekends for the next 13 years. After that, I ventured on up into Omaha, took a transition over into Investigative Services Division, and I was tasked with dealing with the state-level Pharmaceutical Diversion program. And pretty much what I've been doing ever since, anything that deals more with Nebraska statutes rather than federal, that's what I get to deal with. So.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we're super glad you're here, John.
Appreciate it.
We talk about the war on drugs, so to speak, and it's gone by a lot of different names over the years, but without a doubt, whether they're street drugs or pharmaceutical drugs that are used for, abusive purposes, they drive a lot of crime in Nebraska and nationally across the country. So, Chris, what things does the State Patrol have in place to deal with drugs? So that covers a lot of different bases. But
it does. It really does. So, you always have your illicit side of the house, right? Mm-hmm. Our marijuanas, our methamphetamines, cocaines, things of that nature. Yep. Typical road operations all the way down to task forces across the state. Each troop area, we have 6 troop areas. They all have a drug division. Some are in task force, some with locals out in those areas, as well as we also have some partnerships with the federal agencies as well, DEA more specifically. In the Omaha metro area, we have a commercial interdiction unit. We have more of a specialty stuff is what we do, right, with the pharmaceutical diversion, and then what Tyler does with the overdoses task force that's up there. So one thing we developed in this is a reporting alerting process, which we'll get into later, that is an assist to the healthcare providers to get the information out when there's fraudulent activity occurring there.
Okay. So all gamuts, all corners of the spectrum on drug enforcement. Separate though from the federal level.
Correct.
And you guys have a broader reach as the State Patrol than just our local city and county law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, and we're here to assist those local city agencies as well as the county agencies and any investigations they have in their areas.
Perfect.
And we're not the ones that come in and take over. We're just a mere additional asset that's available to assist in specific cases that require some of the specialty skills we have or the assets that we have available.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into some of the pharmaceutical enforcement stuff, and some of this is enforcement, but I'm sure a lot of this, John, is prevention and education stuff too. Is that
actually a lot of it is an educational component? We start out, and we know that there's some level of discomfort whenever somebody sees law enforcement around, and we tended to get that vibe when you go into pharmacies, go speak with healthcare professionals. And it does take that education and to put them at ease and get that buy-in. And so we just try to be there to let them know what resources we can provide and how we can help them. And the better job we do, the more buy-in that we get from them, the quicker response, the more frequency that they're letting us know if there's any suspicious activity. And that just helps us do our job better and them do theirs.
perfect?
I think it's very important to mention here, and I'm going to make Chief Deputy Houchin laugh when I say this, but there's a customer service element in this that we do, right? We've learned over the years, this isn't something new, right? The patrol did this back in years in the 90s, early 90s, and it's kind of evolves and rotates. However, the focus on fentanyl, the focus on overdoses has increased. Pharmaceutical diversion and overdoses is with pharmaceuticals is probably the third highest. I think we got maybe marijuana, cocaine above that, but it's the third highest overdose that we have with prescription drugs, right? That's what it is. Why? Why would that be? Very easy. Not everybody knows where their corner drug dealer is. However, where is the pharmacy?
Everybody knows, yeah.
Yeah, one close, right? So it's legal, right? Legal process. They've just diverted that process to that location.
And I think they think it's safer too because it's not off the street and things.
Regulated.
Yeah.
Right.
Somewhat regulated.
Yeah, it's regulated. It's harder to get, harder to maintain or get there. So that's always one of the big things is that. And, with that, we've also noticed that when pharmacies were calling in to 911 or a local police department, right, saying that somebody's there to pick up a fraudulent script, in the queue of things that day, there may be another 25 phone calls, waiting calls on hold. And they have to prioritize those calls that come in. And maybe that pharmaceutical call of a fake script is not going to be the high priority. You have violent crimes occurring. You have, people getting hurt, car accidents, domestics, whatever it may be. And so the pharmacies would call and they wouldn't get anything back for 30, 45 minutes. The guy leaves, and it's not there anymore. So what we have strived to do is a 3 to 5 minute response so that they get that customer service, they get that feedback, and then we can gather the information, determine if it's fraudulent, and then we're able to go ahead and get that shoved out as an alert so then all the pharmacies know, right?
Sure.
Chain pharmacies will talk to each other internally, but in a regional aspect, a Hy-Vee is not going to talk to a Walgreens or vice versa, right? But we can control that. So they report to us, we shove it out. So we're a clearinghouse, for lack of better terms.
Well, it's important to jump on that quickly because a lot of times the person who is trying to get the script has a fake ID or anything like that at that point, and getting your hands on them and being able to identify them helps a lot than it is trying to catch them 30 minutes behind.
Yeah, and we actually are going to probably dive into it a little bit more later. But a lot of the times, if you miss that window of opportunity, it could be gone.
Yeah,
and
they're down the road.
Yeah, you're not going to get them across the street. They're probably outside of the state or Lord knows where.
So why don't we break it down for our listeners that maybe aren't familiar with this at all? They've never heard of pharmaceutical diversion. What's the program and how is it kind of set up?
At its very base, pharmaceutical diversion is basically altering a prescribed substance from its originally intended purpose. It's right there on the bottle. You see a doctor is going to have your name on it with the directions on how to use it, how many times a day, that kind of thing. And so if you deviate from that, say take too much or you're giving it out or selling it, that's where we have the event of diversion, and that's where we start stepping in. And so, that's essentially what I deal with at the state level. And then, of course, it can grow bigger than that on the grand spectrum, and that's where I start talking to people like Tyler, who deals with it at more of the federal level.
So just to get our terminology right, when we're talking pharmaceutical diversion, we're talking about using prescription drugs for what's other than their intended or prescribed purpose.
Correct. And diversion happens in several ways. It could be a doctor shopper, a burglary, a fake script, whatever it may be. But you're taking that legal substance and you're diverting off of that chain of what it should be to be prescribed legally. Yep. And then it hits the streets in some way, shape, or form. So.
Okay.
I think a lot of people don't realize that if I'm prescribed, let's say, a painkiller or narcotic, and I don't use them all, and then my wife gets a headache or has a pain, and I'll say, well, I've got these, take one. That's diversion. That's illegal, and that's diverting those drugs to a purpose not intended, right?
Yes, absolutely. The prescription's given to you, and it's prescribed towards what your health needs are at that time. The doctor didn't see your friend. The doctor didn't see your wife. And so you to give it to somebody else, that it classifies as a felony. It's diversion. Yep. You can't do that. So
the problem is, like Tyler alluded to, the healthcare professional has not seen your spouse. There might be an allergic reaction to that medication that you're not aware of, and so you might be putting them in harm's way by doing what you think is help.
And I think what you said put it right on the head here. Sources of prescription painkillers, some information we've been able to obtain, roughly 38% come from a friend or relative freely, right? Freely, voluntarily, right? So like you said, then that other about 36% would come from a prescription provided to them by their healthcare provider. And then the third largest is a relative or friend that purchased them for them, right? You don't get down into the actual street level dealing per se, down to 6% or less, So most of them is exactly what you talked about, Sheriff.
Or somebody figures out Grandpa and Grandma have that script and they go into the
unsecured meds.
Yep, and take it and do that part of it too.
So maybe before we get into the solution, or at least what we're trying to do about it, you mentioned some stats. Maybe it's a good time to just talk about the problem and so what we're seeing. So you guys have provided some stuff in here of just how explosive the trends are in the number of prescriptions, but that follows pretty closely the number of overdose deaths involving prescriptions over the last 20 years.
Yeah, whenever we talk about overdose deaths, we break it down into three waves, and everyone's seen this on the news and it's in the media all the time now. But the first wave was your pharmaceutical companies and their false advertising. There's Hulu documentaries on it now and Netflix documentaries kind of explain that all. But the overprescribing and saying that this is a safe substance, you can use it for just average pain and it's use it every day, and we've now found that that's not true. But we had a large amount of people addicted, and when they get shut off because they do divert somehow because they need more and more, they turn to illicit substances that have the same effects. And then it turned to heroin. That was the second wave. Now what we're seeing, which is the deadliest wave that we've seen, is the synthetic opioids like fentanyl and all of its different analogs. And that's the majority of what our overdose deaths now are now. And there's a stat out there that fentanyl now is the number one killer for ages 18 to 45. So you're healthy people, but that is your that's your number one killer now is fentanyl, which is crazy.
We worked a case, Ben, you and I mean, this is when we were in criminal over 10 years ago. I mean, that was kind of one of the first ones I think that we had at the sheriff's office, at least that I can recall, where we had heard about these patches, that people were either cutting or diluting or doing weird things with, and actually injecting the substance because they were very high volume users of this stuff. And sadly, it was an overdose death that we worked, only to find out that the prescription that this victim had been using was actually prescribed to a boyfriend
who was in jail.
Who was in jail at the time, and had been filling the prescription under someone else's name. So,
in like fentanyl, we do see the patches. We do see there's like lollipops that you get prescribed, but now you're not seeing that prescribed as much unless you have severe pain. Yeah, I mean, if they're almost end of life type of care, but they have to turn to something else. So then we see the illicit fentanyl, which is the powder in the pill form that is hitting our streets like crazy.
Now, is some of that not being prescribed but being made down in Mexico is what I'm beginning to hear a lot of that part?
Yeah, the majority of our fentanyl does come from Mexico as far as the illicit goes. That's what we see. It all traces back somewhere down there. So we have not yet, that I'm aware of, seen like a lab making fentanyl here in Nebraska. It has to come, just like methamphetamine and any other drug, we're seeing it's coming from somewhere else. So,
from the pharmaceutical side, prescription side, what's scary is we make up 5% of the world's population, right? But we consume 80% of the world's prescription drugs.
Wow.
That's a large number.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, that's significant. And one thing that over the years that Tyler's beaten to my brain is, last year CDC estimated roughly 735 Americans lost their lives, right, from overdoses. And as Tyler put it, and he puts it the best way I've ever heard it, is that is a commercial airplane liner per day crashing into the ground, right?
Wow.
All right, we're talking over roughly 300 a day. Now, let's just put that in perspective. If that happened, what would happen in the United States?
Oh, people go crazy.
Everything would be shut down.
Ground airplanes.
It'd be on the news every single day, and it wouldn't stop until there would be a solution.
Yeah.
But yet we see it with overdoses, and we just record statistics. We're trying to make a more proactive stance on this, but it's not catching the headlines quite like we should.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking. I mean, that's like war numbers when you're talking casualties at that.
And that's not even adding up the near misses where Narcan is used and saves the person's life.
Yeah, and Narcan, it has been a good thing, I think. We see it prescribed more and more now, and I think you get the first free dose from the pharmacies, and that's saving so many lives. We see a lot of the overdose deaths we see that person overdosed 3, 4, 5 times beforehand, and we've been revived with Narcan, and wish we would be able to get to them sooner, and start to investigate it, because that federal charge that we look at, we can charge them with serious bodily injury or death if they distribute leading to that. Well, it's serious bodily injury counts as just an overdose. Even if they live, we can still go after that dealer and try to figure out who gave them that lethal dose.
Yeah.
And hopefully get, if we go and do it fast enough, we can then get their supply off the streets before they give it to 10 other people that, also overdose. Because we see it in batches a lot, because there's a bad batch that happens. And then, we see a lot of bodies drop really fast.
Yeah, they're using the same amount, but the purity of it is so much higher, and then they
and
have
it's
a lot
not
of
coming,
problem.
the illicit stuff's not coming from a pharmacy. So you might get a hot one, and then, the next time you get it's hardly anything. So you use the same amount, and then you're like, oh man, that one was a lot stronger than the previous one, because it's not mixed right. It's not a chemist sitting in a lab. It's,
you got Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Making
It's a
this
great
stuff
way
in
to
the lab,
you have no idea what you're getting.
And I think one thing that comes to mind, we talk overdoses a lot. We say overdose a lot. However, and we may get into this more later, but there's poisoning also comes to mind, right?
Sure.
Because if I have addiction problems, and there's people have addiction problems out there in this world, psychologically and physically exposed and predetermined to potentially have that happen, right? And let's just say I was a cocaine user, right? I know I take cocaine. I can take so much. I build a tolerance to cocaine, and at some point in time, I've used cocaine so long, I have to take more and more and more and more, and then I step over that line because I have to take so much. That's an overdose, right?
Okay.
However, college kid sitting there studying for his exams, and he needs to stay awake and needs an Adderall from his buddy, which is obviously diversion.
Right.
However, buddy gives him Adderall. Well, what he doesn't know is that Adderall that the buddy got, he bought off the street, right? And he bought 10 of them, and they're laced with fentanyl. And that one, this gentleman is woman, whoever may be trying to take an Adderall because they believe it's an Adderall. However, it has fentanyl in it, and they go overdose.
They're poisoned.
They're poisoned.
Yeah.
It's not overdose at that point. So that's why probably the scariest thing to me now in this world, and it's kind of funny. I got a lot of kids. I got 6 kids, right? Great family. Love my family to death. And I spend more time talking to them about there's 3 people you can take a pill from: mom, dad, and the doctor, and that's it. Mm-hmm. You know, the old days of you guys and us getting the lectures about drinking alcohol, doing other things that we shouldn't be doing. To me, the most scariest thing as a parent is them taking a substance that they shouldn't be taking.
The scary thing for prescription drugs, at least in my mind, is that this impacts people from all walks of life. I mean, you're not just talking, you know, when you think of street drugs, you know, you might not always
Skid Row and all that. You know?
Yeah, you're not always thinking of the person that's sitting in class next to you, or you know, the doctor or something like that. But I mean, we all get injuries where we might need prescription drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Every investigation that I've run where it's more addiction-based rather than for-profit type of a situation, you will talk to these people, and it'll all start out with, well, when I was playing football, I blew out my knee, had to have an ACL repair or something like that, and then all of a sudden, I was taking these pain meds, and I just could not stop. Or I've also had back surgeries from, I don't know, work-related injury, pregnancies that women have talked about how they were prescribed opiates, and then they had to take that next step because when they were cut off from the doctor, they didn't have anywhere else to go, but they were addicted.
Yeah, we're not talking people that were, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd or were, you know, into partying and all that stuff. I mean, these are people that are taking medications for a legitimate purpose and, you know, end up in that spiral.
Yeah, it ends up grabbing them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Hey, I'm Captain John Vick with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. When it comes to your career, don't settle for good enough. Don't settle for ordinary. We won't either. Be different, be better, be exceptional. Start your future today at joinlso.com. So I think we've hit on the problem, you know, fairly comprehensively. What are we working on to do about it?
So we have taken an approach of trying to help out in multiple different ways. One is education, not only education within law enforcement, but education with healthcare providers. We've done various conferences and trainings and put together some WebExes here to make the pharmacies, pharmacists, healthcare providers, whoever they are, we've taught with the VA and various other places, and provided them information about what we see, educate them on pharmaceutical diversion, methods of diversion that we're seeing, how to spot some fake prescriptions that may be coming into their facilities, how to report it to us, and then work through those various scenarios. We've also done trainings with law enforcement across the state and also region. We've taught in South Dakota. We have one of the most unique programs around, I think. And I don't know, Tyler, I don't know if there's any other state quite doing what we're doing exactly the way we're doing it. We've created a reporting and alerting process for the healthcare providers that they can reach out to us one of 4 ways. And it goes to a group of investigators that immediately get it on their phone. And our goal is to call them back within 3 to 5 minutes.
That's where you're talking that customer service piece.
Yep, that customer service piece. So then we can, if they got something that comes in that looks suspicious to them, they reach out to us and we work through the problem with them together. Once we've determined that it's been fraudulently documented, written, then we go ahead and we send out a regional alert. And so we have all the healthcare pharmacies in a contact list that we're able to filter down to the region. send them an email and a fax saying, hey, this is going on, this is occurring. Because a lot of the time when fraud is occurring, it's not going to happen at one pharmacy, right? Because there's a lot of great pharmacists in this world that catch that fraud. However, if they don't get it from the first one, they go to the next one, and they'll shotgun the area. It's the shotgun effect, right?
Yep.
One of the BBs is going to land somewhere. And so that's what we do is we shove that information out, then we coordinate with local law enforcement to try to get a response there and then start an investigation.
We were talking before, and you were talking about these major crime groups, gangs, and things coming in and doing some of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
and what's happening?
So mostly what we see, mainly there's two types of groups per se. There's more than two, but the main two are you have those folks that have unfortunately become addicted at some point from an injury, whatever it may be, and those folks are the folks that need help. However, what we've seen in our investigations over the last several years is there's a criminal element or a criminal organized element in this, right? And they're in it for profit. They're merely just there to make money, okay? And they travel across the entire country. They'll put groups and traveling groups together to go through areas and regions and try to pick up pharmaceuticals from the hospitals, from the pharmacies, and then take them back and sell them on the street for a profit.
They're also, those same criminal organizations have moved towards more pharmacy burglaries. And I know I've worked a few around this area with Jeremy Shores, and I mean, he does a great job, and he's one of the more educated people on this topic. But they jump counters, they break windows, and the reason that they're doing that, and we're seeing them move away towards those national retail chains, is if you break into a Walgreens, you got to break through the front sliding doors, the second sliding doors. By that time, the alarm's going off, and you're probably in a bigger populated area like Lincoln, where there's law enforcement closer by, and then you got to get back to the pharmacy counter, which has probably got a gate down.
Right.
But if we go out to little small town Nebraska, where they got to break the glass window and jump the counter, and by the time the alarm's going off, if they have an alarm, with no videos, if they have videos, then the county's got to come from
or
wherever they
deputy
are.
or troopers 15 minutes away. And
on a good day, and so there's just, and they're in and out. They grab as much as they can. And we're seeing the same approach on the criminal organizations that are using it for the fraudulent scripts. And we're catching a lot of these people now, and I think it's a lot to do with the program. Any retail pharmacy that we've seen burglarized, we've gotten people and we've indicted people, and we're catching them now more than what we ever have before. So
I would say too that not only are they going to be here doing prescription fraud, right? They're going to be in the area doing additional frauds. We've had cases where they've come in and had stolen credit card information, and they're buying goods and products. I believe one case we had, they're buying lawnmowers and trailers, moving on down the road to the next city or the next state, posting Facebook ads, selling those lawnmowers, cash only, cash in hand to fuel their illegal activity. And a lot of the stuff that we see in there, we see some of the COVID fund fraud going on too, with COVID and PPP loans, things like that.
Well, and that's the money stream, of you're selling or pawning, stolen goods, and then you're using that to fuel your purchases of drugs and addictions and things. So it's a cycle, and so the crimes blend together. But then even where those crimes are committed, like you said, they don't know any borders either. So being able to have that communication, talk back and forth, not only between different jurisdictions, but also with us in law enforcement, making sure that different investigators that are working different crimes are talking together too. So
yeah, there's no great deconfliction tool, right, for this type of activity. So essentially, we kind of became somewhat of that deconfliction tool.
Nice.
And clearinghouse for intelligence and information between the healthcare providers and various law enforcement groups, and that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Our alerting process generally started out just to advise other pharmacies of activity that was going on in the area, but we've actually throughout the years gotten buy-in, and now we also include corporate business heads and also other law enforcement agencies. If there's anything not only in the state of Nebraska but now regionally happening, we get alerts from South Dakota Board of Pharmacies that will alert us if they have anything, because obviously if we have people that are doing that shotgun blast across our region and they're coming from states away. They're not just focusing on Nebraska. They're hitting everything along the way, and they're still moving on. It's a national problem.
Yeah,
So
they hit it for one day, then move on to the next bigger city down the road a
and
ways.
that's why we need to be able to communicate
Yes.
with have people outside of the state of Nebraska. Not so.
Yeah, I can throw a couple of the reporting numbers, alerting numbers that we've gotten. The reports we received, I don't have it in front of you guys. I apologize. I got it sitting here, but it's so far since the inception in 2020. We incepted this 2018, I think 18, 19, somewhere in there. About 450. We didn't do a great job of tracking it in the beginning, but since 2020, 450 reports we've received from pharmacies. Okay, we don't get into the alert numbers out because one pharmacy, two pharmacies, three pharmacies might report the same thing. So then we aren't going to keep sending alerts over and over and over. We don't have a great number as far as accurate numbers for that because it's harder to manage. But reporting cities, Omaha's about 43%, Lincoln 22%. And then we get into some of the metro areas, Bellevue, Grand Island, Hastings. It tapers off down to 3%, 2% pretty quick. So bulk of the activity, obviously, is where bulk of the
people,
population
yeah.
is, bulk of the pharmacies.
Right.
So that's where we've spent a lot of our time is in these metropolitan areas because they can work for the quickest and the fastest.
So are you talking about the smurfing cases? And you mentioned Investigator Schwartz. He's kind of our go-to guy here on smurfing cases on people that are getting strangers to buy pseudoephedrine for them to make methamphetamine. So is that part of your purview or not?
It's really not. I mean, we would, but we just haven't seen much
Okay.
on the smurfing stuff. But when I interviewed for this spot years ago, Jeremy was the one I went and talked to because he was kind of the subject matter expert and does a phenomenal job at it. But it's a lot of like what started off as like fake prescriptions.
Okay.
And the criminal organizations, they will send in people like they're almost their worker, and we've talked to law enforcement a lot about how to respond because we're actually looking for that person that might be out in the car,
Right.
Because they're the ones controlling the show and they're sending people in, and that person's dispensable to them. Like, so the law enforcement responds and we go arrest that person. They might not have much to do with it other than they were trying to earn a few bucks. But the person in the car is collecting all of it and then going back to Chicago, Minneapolis, Washington, and kind of doing it that way. So,
Yeah, kind of on your smurfing thing, he's 100% right. They send runners in and they have drivers drive.
Right.
And they have crew leaders who lead the crew. I'll give you an example. One of our cases was a group out of Chicago area, and they were doing some reporting to pharmacies. So we had about 2,600 calls for a year and a half of their phone data we looked through. 2,600 calls to roughly 1,400 pharmacies in 34 states in a year and a half.
Wow.
So, I mean,
They were busy.
they're busy. They're running multiple crews and multiple runners. So yeah, it equates kind of your smurfing. We don't see a lot of the homemade methamphetamine anymore because
Those precursors.
the price is so.
Yeah, and the precursors are
and it also goes back to that customer service aspect of like, we serve the public, and those are, 1,400 different pharmacies that are having to deal with this problem, and deal with this fraudulent stuff that's trying to take business from them, and they're having to call the cops while also serving their customers, and it's a nuisance, it's a problem, and it just impacts it, the whole economics of those small pharmacies.
and it costs the legitimate consumers more in the end 100%. To deal with all this.
Yeah, and he hit it on the head. It's that's one of the big selling points when we talk to the larger groups, the larger retail chains. Is like, look, we're here to help you, and if you work with us, we're going to help reduce some of that and the man hours. I mean, think of the man hours spent and just the cost, not only on law enforcement, but those community or those health care provider companies. They're spending so much money inefficiently, completely inefficient. And so we're hoping to be that clearinghouse, to help them become a little more efficient. So
Isn't it just scary how much in demand this stuff is? Because without the demand, they wouldn't be doing this. And there's a lot of people out doing it. And that's what's really scary to me.
Yeah, it's a money-making machine, and as long as it keeps churning out a profit, they're not going to stop. It's a 24-hour day, 365-day process.
Yeah, and it's so sad that so many people want this and keeping them in business.
Well, it's sad that we have so many Americans that have have these addiction problems that aren't getting addressed, right? I mean,
Let's say that there is a listener out there who wants to get in touch with you guys, or maybe there's a pharmacy owner out there that's not one of the big chains, but it's, the Chris Apley Pharmacy in small town Nebraska.
Yep.
So how did they get in touch with your team and tap into those resources?
Yeah, no problem. So what we've done is we've obtained all the pharmacies' fax numbers throughout the state, and so we've sent them out fax information. They've got a phone number they can hit us on. They've got an email address. They've got an online reporting tool, and we made it abundantly clear. I don't even care if you just call them to talk and tell me hi. You can fill out that online form, and somebody's going to call you back in 3 to 5 minutes, because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
If it's just a mere question, hey, I got a question, boom. So they can get a hold of us. And then there's the phone number that they have available to them.
Okay.
It's a 24-hour number. Outside of that, if anybody else has anything, if it's a civilian who has some questions, right, citizen of any area, there's always the hotlines that they can call into, hotline tips. I believe you guys have one probably. We have one as well. Main line for the State Patrol also is another one. So.
And let's see, is that like the main number?
Yeah, the 402-471-4545.
Perfect. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Drug Take Back Day. First of all, why do we do Drug Take Back Days?
Well, there's obviously unused medications out there. People either overcome their afflictions and don't feel the need to finish out their whole prescription, or maybe there might be just a situation where
Grandpa and Grandma die.
yeah, hospice situations. You got end-of-life care where you're just trying to provide pain relief, and those people are afforded a lot of different prescriptions, anything to make them at ease, and then all of a sudden end-of-life comes, and what do we do with all these medications? We partner with the DEA, and twice a year we try to set up these take-backs, and I'll be personally working in conjunction with your agency, the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, and we'll be set up at the Hy-Vee on 51st and O Street here in Lincoln. It's going to be on October 28th. We're going to run it for approximately 4 hours from 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And what we'll do is we'll try to help you dispose of those medications appropriately. We can. There are certain things that we can and cannot take, like syringes are not going to be able to be taken, but if we can help you dispose of any unwanted medications appropriately rather than sending them on down the drain or just throwing them in the garbage, we will do so.
It's funny. The sheriff and I were talking yesterday, back when I first started, and we do a lot of coroner reports and coroner calls here, and we would go to a hospice death or in-home death, usually hospice because there's a nurse there, and we would sit there and the medication would be there, and we'd watch them dump it into the toilet, flush it, and there was a form that we had to sign at that point in time, and that's how they ended up doing it all the time. And we just didn't realize how bad that really was.
Nobody did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's evolving over the years, and we're figuring all this out. Like, we can potentially be contaminating the water and everything else. So they've decided to do something about it. I want to piggyback a little bit more off the why we're doing the take-backs. Some of the numbers, we got 82% of the pharmacies that fill prescriptions are for opioids, right? And what's our problem? Opioids.
Yep.
I mean, 82%, right? There's been trends over the 20 years. Just throw some numbers out here that we've received for the nationwide pharmaceuticals filled by prescriptions for opioids, 78 million in 1992, all the way up to about 210 million in 2010, right? I don't have anything newer than that, but you can see the trend. It's moving upwards, right, significantly. Yeah. And so we do take back to try to get some of those opioids back off the streets, which is going to ultimately help us out with some of those addiction problems, which can help us out with the fentanyl crisis that we're all occurring as well, right? He said we'll be there to take back the capsules and all that stuff, the capsules, patches, whatever we can, forms of drugs. No sharp things, anything that's going to prick us, stick us, make us go out or bleed, we cannot have, okay? Liquids, just make sure they're sealed up in those tight bottles that they came in, original. And they will take vape cartridges, vape equipment, as long as there's no batteries involved too. So if you have some of that vaping stuff that you want to get rid of. There are also other alternatives, year-round drop boxes. So the numbers for take back have decreased, and this is the 25th one that they've done for DEA that we support to give you some ideas for the numbers and totals and weights. Looks like from 2019, there were 9,800-ish law enforcement agencies participating across the country. They collected roughly 900 tons. 2020 was 4,100. We had a COVID drop there. Roughly 500 tons. Moving forward all the way up to 22, it was about 684 tons. So a lot of stuff comes in. We get rid of a lot of stuff. And it's good, and it's safely then destroyed, incinerated, and burned in a controlled environment, and we just get it out of the way.
What do you say to the person who has a bunch of pills at grandma's house or their house? Maybe they even got them under questionable circumstances. So can that person bring them in? Are they going to get brought into a small dark room with a lampshade and questions? Okay.
It's like an amnesty day. Now, obviously, we're talking about pharmaceuticals here.
Right.
No illicit narcotics, right? We can't have anything like that. But we don't ask any questions. It's come up, drop your stuff in the bag, have a great day. Sometimes we'll have, I can't really get into the company that we have here, but there's various other ways to get rid of pharmaceuticals that we can provide. You can purchase various drug disposable safe systems, and a company that we have been able to meet with has provided us with some of these that we provide at our sites. And it's nothing more than it looks like a oversized pill bottle with some liquid in it. And it can take up to about 50 capsules. So let's just say you happen to show up at the Hy-Vee on Saturday and you're like, oh, I wish I would have known I have some at home. Well, we'll have some of these with us. We can give you one, and you can take home and safely deposit it. Once it's in there, you can throw it in the trash, and it's been safely neutralized that way.
What happens if the pharmaceuticals are not in their original packaging?
Container.
Yeah, if they're in a pill
Loose,
container.
just bring the pill container on in, and we'll take care of it that way.
Okay. So that's October 28th, 10 to 2 p.m. at the 50th and O Hy-Vee, right in Midtown Lincoln. Awesome.
If you happen to forget where it's at, the DEA site, if you just go there, just Google DEA Drug Take Back Day.
Okay.
They have a list of all the sites that are available in Nebraska. So,
yeah, so this isn't the only one. There's other ones across Nebraska. So that's dea.gov/takebackday. And you can go on there to find a list of, if you're here in Lincoln, great. Come see them at Hy-Vee, but otherwise plenty of other places across Nebraska and throughout the U.S.
Yep. And in Nebraska for October here, we're going to have 18 agencies participating, about 22 sites. And if for some reason you're tied up that day, can't make it, there are additional alternatives. If you go to nebraskameds.org, they have a nice interactive map that you can log on, and they have drop boxes in pharmacies 24/7, 365. Looks like Lancaster County has about 50 locations. So if for some reason you couldn't make that date, there are alternative solutions to get rid of what you need to get rid of.
Good. Well, and I think you spoke right to it, Chris, that there is so much of this out there, and any dent that we can make in that to get it out of the hands of a child that's stumbling across this stuff by mistake, out of the hands of somebody who is addicted, that this is just going to continue to fuel that cycle. The more we can get off the streets, the better for everybody.
Yeah, I look at what's going on in New York at the unfortunate daycare incident they had. Fentanyl. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And just one simple thing can change the trajectory of a family's life.
Yeah.
And not be their fault or their, it just happens. And we don't want that to happen.
Well, I was so shocked with that of how much Narcan they had available, because there was 50 kids at that time, and they were trying to spread. Most first responders are responding to that won't have that amount of Narcan available.
They usually all carry about one dose on us.
One or two, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, does that get us about up to speed? Or do we miss any?
You know what I'd like to ask? I said we work on a lot of coroner investigations, and we have said that we've worked some deaths and done some of that. And I was kind of interested in, we get this, and sometimes you wait 2 months for the lab to come back. This 35-year-old person that seems to be in fairly good health, and they've died, and you do the autopsy and there's nothing physical that should have happened. And so then you're sitting there waiting for that. And then it comes back, they have cocaine, they have fentanyl, and they have all these different things into it. And it really can muddy the water on trying to get those investigations on what exactly caused the death and doing all that. And I know that's something you are working on.
Yeah, and since this group is, well, and even beforehand, we've tried to do some training for law enforcement because it is a time-sensitive deal on a lot of these deaths if we can do an investigation. And so we try to talk about different things that you can look for during an overdose as the law enforcement responder to go, hey, if they have this, maybe if it's a 35-year-old that has no other health problems, like maybe start thinking.
Yeah.
Again,
and a history.
Number one killer for 18 to 45-year-olds. So if they're 35, they drop over dead, and they have a history of drug use, maybe we should treat that almost like a homicide until we know any different. DEA does have a tox program that we use, and I reach out. I get the coroner's list every day for the autopsies. So if I see one in Lancaster County, I reach out, and I just be like, hey, do you need any help? You want me to go and grab a second vial of blood? We send it off, and we can get the tox back pretty quickly. At least then we kind of know. We have an idea of, hey, it comes back in 2 weeks. It does list cocaine, fentanyl mixture. We should probably look at that one a little closer. And the guys here in Lancaster County and Lincoln do a great job usually of responding to those. We get out into the more rural areas where they just don't have the resources and tie it up. So I really try to reach out to those surrounding counties and communities just to be like, hey, we're here to help. Chris spoke on it earlier. We're not there to take over the case. We just want to be able to help and try to get this as fast as we can.
Yeah, the turnaround time is huge on that because, they don't have as much time to get away and destroy evidence and doing all those kind of things.
And we may have the tox results back quick, but we still have to wait for the pathologist report, which could be 3 months. And so anything we can do to react quickly, because it still worked as a drug investigation. We can still go after that dealer, and we may not be able to hit them on distribution leading to death right away because we got to wait for that pathologist report. But if we can turn it and take the drugs off the street at least, then
and get them off the street
and get
too.
them off the street for the time being, then we at least, I think we did our job for the while we wait that 90 days. So
Yeah, and Tyler, I know, and if you can speak to this, but some of those investigations where you may not have everything you need for the first incident where somebody may have overdosed or died, it's still important, right, to get the information because it can follow up to some other cases?
Yeah, we've had tons of cases where we may not have that individual, and we're not able to say that dose that they gave them was the one that led to their death. But then the information we gather, phone dumps from when we arrest them, will open up other investigations that were almost, cold cases per se. And just like, wow, we thought we were dead in the water there, but this person talked, and all of a sudden now we have 3 other ones solved. So it's great to always do follow up and just document what we can as law enforcement because it's going to come back later. We've had 4 or 5-year-old cases that come back into the fold because of an arrest that we have. So it's hard always telling the families like, hey, I'm not going to be able to prosecute that individual that gave your loved one that dose, but we go after them different ways. If I can just get them off the street, that's better than nothing. So
I just think it's great that you guys are doing this, and I don't think a lot of people out in the public really understand how big of an epidemic this is for us, and not just in Nebraska, but throughout the whole United States.
I would say it's not just the public, and that's why Chris spoke on just about training our law enforcement. Like we do these classes for law enforcement, and we hand out these smart cards because a lot of times if they do get called to a pharmacy for a fake script or, a theft of whatever, our cops that are just working the uniform every day, they have a ton of other pending calls. They just want to get in and get out, and they're just not aware that there's specific state statutes that address these type of crimes that are felonies, not the misdemeanor $10 theft of what it cost the pharmacy for that 20 pills that were stolen.
Right.
It's not known to the public. Why? Because illicit narcotic trafficking typically involves a lot of violence on top of it, right?
Yeah.
Where this here, there's not a lot of violence going on with the plumber that blew his rotator cuff out. Now he's addicted, and now he's got to feed his addiction, and so he's going to see multiple doctors, or the person who keeps a rotten tooth in their mouth to go to the dentist to keep feeding their addictions. That's not that unusual, right?
I think you said it earlier about how it just all walks of life. We've investigated cops, teachers, attorneys, doctors, orthopedic surgeons that have all the money in the world and studied their whole lives, but addiction doesn't know.
It affects everybody.
And so they're good people that we investigate. So.
I mean, to piggyback on that, you wouldn't even think about all the different places that this can occur, and I mean, just how ambiguous this violation can be. We have talked to veterinary hospitals and places like that. People will try to obtain from there. I mean, addiction knows no boundary.
Yeah, we worked a case here where the doctor was giving out scripts to a patient, and the patient would go in and do it, and he'd take half, and the doctor would take half, and you just, like I said, and he just had an addiction, and that was his way of getting it and trying to not get caught.
Yeah, and there's obviously privacy laws because we're dealing with individual people's
Medical
records
records,
and conditions. So, and for a long time, Nebraska is one of the last states to develop a prescription drug monitoring program in the United States. And so if, let's just say I went to the sheriff as my doctor and I needed a prescription, said, ow, my shoulder hurts, blah, blah, blah. Sheriff writes me a prescription. Boom. I go over to the chief deputy and see him, and here's my prescription. I go see Tyler. Prescription. They couldn't see each other's stuff, right?
Right.
And so that's where a lot of the problems in the past, again, that silent, unknown, siloed information was occurring. Now that we have that system in place, it's helping. But as well as I know in law enforcement and this type of work, it takes time for everybody to get into that system of checking that, and it takes some time and effort.
Well, that, and then criminals get smarter on how they're going to go about to defeat it.
Absolutely. And as we're developing, it's getting better, but we still have steps to take. I personally have an investigation where the only reason that we found out there was a problem was because it was great work by the pharmacist. They have access to this monitoring program, and they were able to find out the prescriptions that were issued to this person in Nebraska, but Nebraska doesn't necessarily talk to all the other states. And since we were in an area in Omaha, right across the border, they can go over to Iowa. She had access to Iowa's, which also had reciprocity to another state, Oklahoma, where this person had residency in. And now when she looks at those two programs, she was able to see there were overlapping prescriptions and doctor shopping. But if you would have looked at each one individually, you would have never seen that.
Well,
and there's that hesitancy for private businesses to share information with law enforcement. There always has been in the past.
Well, yeah, you're talking HIPAA violations, and there's a big deal with that in the healthcare community, and so yeah, it's difficult sometimes
and
getting into.
This is kind of unique, right? Because it's not all about working a case, right? It's more about detecting what's going on, disrupting what's going on, deterring for this fraudulent activity happening.
And hopefully they can get some help along the way.
And that, you hit on it. Like these folks that are out there that got in a car wreck, have an addiction now because they hurt their shoulder, leg, knee, whatever, they need help.
Yep.
I mean, mistakes happen to a lot of great people, right? And this is one of those areas, the intent's not there per se, right? They need to get back on track on the right way. And so those folks need that help. And sometimes, unfortunately, they have to come in contact with us, and that's their first step to realizing they truly have a problem serious enough to go get that help.
I think the big takeaway, that I've heard from this is whether you're, a cop that's listening to this, whether you're a pharmacist that's listening to this, just a citizen that's listening to this, by being aware of this issue and by participating in things like Drug Take Back Day, by getting in touch with your group, from the pharmacy level, as far as sharing information, the life that you might be saving could be your neighbor's life, could be your kid's life, could be, people that you see in your community that are going through something that you don't even know. But by there are everyday activities that people can do to combat this issue. And again, big places to go, dea.gov/takebackday. Come and see your team at the 50th and O Hy-Vee coming up October 28th from 10 to 2, where you can drop off any unneeded prescription drugs that day. And also just check out your website. You guys are at nebraska.gov at the State Patrol website. And just recommend people go there, check it out if they've got any other questions. So does that about wrap us up today, guys?
I think so.
Hey, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, we really appreciate everything that you and your team do, and thanks for spending time with us today.
Yeah, and we all appreciate it. We appreciate having us in, and we appreciate all the work that your office does, because, again, you guys do a phenomenal job to take care of this county, and it's greatly appreciated.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. We want to thank everybody for joining us and listening to the information provided about pharmaceutical diversion in Nebraska. Quick reminder, the Drug Take-Back Day coming up is on October 28th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the 50th and O Street Hy-Vee in Midtown Lincoln. Be sure to head over there and you can meet some of the people that were on today's episode. We want to thank the Nebraska State Patrol for all the work that they do every day to combat pharmaceutical diversion in Nebraska, and also for the partnership that they have with our agency. To learn more about pharmaceutical diversion or the Drug Take-Back Day, head to www.dea.gov/takebackday. You can also go to www.nebraskameds.org for an interactive map of other locations where you can dispose of extra pharmaceuticals and prescription narcotics within Nebraska. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and follow the 902 podcast. You can also reach out to us on social media at LSO Nebraska. Also, you can send us an email. lso@lancaster.ne.gov is where you can find us on email. And we hope to catch you next time. Thanks for listening.